Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Matt Bernier, Mike Beer, the DRF.com formulator race of the day for Saturday, June the 10th. It's the big one, the Grade 1 Belmont Stakes, the third Jewel in Racing's Triple Crown. Of course, it's at 1.5 miles. Let's take a look at this field. It's a big field, and there are a ton of question marks. Our Belmont Stakes coverage is presented by Naira Bets. Let's just take this field in post-position order. We've got a ton to discuss. And, Matt, let's talk about the number 1 Twisted Tom, Chad Brown, Javier Castellano. The horse has won 3 in a row, 20-1 on the morning line.
20-1 because he's incredibly slow on paper. He's yet to earn a buyer north of 80 at this point, when most of his contemporaries are in the mid-90 range. You know, if you like a horse like this, you're banking on chaos, that this is not the most consistent group or the most talented group, and you'd like to think that the distance, 1.5 miles, will be a great equalizer.
This whole 3-year-old season has been about chaos. Classic Empire, who would have been the heavy favorite in this race, was forced to withdraw on Wednesday due to an injury. Why not Twisted Tom, Mike Beer?
Why not any of the bigger prices in this race? We'll see what happens. You know, Matt, sort of touched on it. The reason to try horses like him in this race, not only just because, let's be honest, it's not a great crop of 3-year-olds. The distance. I mean, distance is the great equalizer in horse racing. And a lot of these horses, I think you want to look at them and feel like, 1.5 miles for that horse? Really? I'm not so sure. Maybe Twisted Tom gets it.
Is the number 2 Taproot Mike the perfect example of a dirtied up horse? He looked really good winning the Tampa Bay Derby. The Bluegrass was disappointing at 2-1, but he didn't break very well over a track that was speed favoring, and the pace was slow to boot, so he had a lot of work to do to make up that advantage. And in the Derby, didn't have the cleanest trip in the world. He
had a lot of trouble early in the Derby. I just feel like it compromised him, if only because he just couldn't get any position in the race. I just thought overall with the trip that he got in the race, he did the best that he could with it, and he got 6th. I thought he ran fine. I think he ran great. I don't want to call him dirtied up necessarily, if only because I hear what you're saying about his Bluegrass, but he was just awful in there. I mean, he just didn't run. It starts to make me wonder, how good is he actually? And I don't know, at 4-1, do I need him in the Belmont?
One of the few horses in the race with a fast race. That 96 Spire in the Tampa Bay Derby would put him right in the mix, but you get a feeling he's going to get bet.
I kind of feel like he's sort of the wise guy horse, where a lot of people are going to look at him and say, you know, he did get bounced around early on in the Derby, and then maybe he didn't have the cleanest of trips. I guess I just look at it and say, even when he did a little bit of running, I don't know that I want to call it running. I mean, you look at it, he was basically 10 lengths off this thing throughout. It's not like he really put in any sort of bid, and he was all out for about a half mile. He's just the kind of horse, if I use him, I'll use him underneath only.
Matt, multiple Grade 1 winner Gormley really gutted it out in the Santa Anita Derby, a slow edition of the Santa Anita Derby. It only received an 88 buyer speed figure. What happened at Churchill Downs?
I have to be honest, I don't think it was a terrible race. I kind of feel like he made a little bit of a middle move going into the far turn. You keep in mind he was 4 or 5 paths off the rail, basically the duration, and if you believe that you needed to be inside that day, he had every right to get a little bit tired at the end. My biggest concern is he has started 4 times since New Year's Day, and in all 4 races he has regressed from a buyer's standpoint. There's just a part of me that looks at it and says, I like the horse, I don't know that I want him here.
I like his tactical speed, and it seems like you're slowly coming around to him a little bit.
Well, I've always liked him as a horse. I agree with Matt in that, he's just not showing the development you'd like to see from 2 to 3. You sort of thought he was a good 2-year-old, and he's going to get a lot better at 3, and he hasn't. It doesn't seem like he's really progressing. On the other hand, I think his Derby's a little underrated. I don't think he was ever going to win the Derby, but to be chasing 4 wide for about a mile in that race before you get tired, I don't think it was a disastrous performance at all. I actually think he ran pretty well in there. I don't know if he wants 1.5 miles, guys. It seems like he doesn't want 1.5 miles. I just feel like his Derby's a little bit underrated, and he might be a price in this race. I'm going to use him.
If you're making the case for Taproot, can't you make the same case for J. Boy's Echo? He ran a fast race in a prep, the Grade 3 Gotham, albeit with a perfect trip and ride. The Bluegrass, speed favoring track, slow pace, had to rally into it. And in the Derby, not the cleanest trip in the world, Mike.
Yeah, I do look at him that way. And as a matter of fact, I would just rather have him than Taproot.
Only at a better price.
At a better price, because I liked everything that he did from his debut up to and through the Gotham. And I know he got a perfect trip in the Gotham, and he took advantage of it, but he was also pretty impressive there. And he beat a good horse, and he got a figure for it. All those things I liked. I hated his Bluegrass. He didn't do any running in the Derby, but he didn't get a great trip in that race either. I just feel like at a price, maybe he'll get the distance, and maybe he will be 15-1 in this race. I would rather use him than a horse like Tapper.
Another horse with a fast fig on paper.
Yeah, I believe it. Actually, it's the fastest race any of the horses in this race has
Right,
run
now the
yet.
Classic Empire's out.
The only concern I have with him, I really liked him as a 2-year-old. I thought he looked very promising. If you strip the 102, what are you left with? You're left with Twisted Tom. And if I look at that sort of argument, Twisted Tom, I think at least can be a little bit closer to the pace. J-Boy's Echo, we kind of know. I know as a 2-year-old he had a little bit of tactical speed. I think he's going to need to use that if he's going to have any chance.
Big class hike for the 5, Hollywood Handsome for trainer Dallas Stewart. 4th in the Louisiana Derby, 5th in the Illinois Derby. Got a win last time out at Churchill Downs, but a big hike.
I mean, I know that he's headed the right way. His last 3 races are the fastest that he's ever run, but to me, he was just pretty hard to make in this race. I guess he's for the guys that think, Dallas Stewart, he wins or they run well at big prices in the Triple Crown. I guess he's for those guys.
Needs a giant buyer boost.
I liked him in the Illinois Derby, and I didn't think he did any running whatsoever. That most recent race was okay, but he's going to need to move up.
Looking at Lee, ran really well in the Kentucky Derby, got one of the great rides of the year from Corey Lannery, just saving ground, not a stone in his path. And it was sort of the Cherry Wine Preakness from last year, where he then went into the Belmont Cherry Wine. Some people bet him off the good effort in the Preakness, but you had the feeling it was Tripp aided the good effort, and Cherry Wine kind of regressed in the Belmont. And I wonder if that's what happened to Looking at Lee. Although he ran quite fine in the Preakness, he didn't run the Derby.
No, his Derby it had almost everything to do with getting a perfect closer's trip up the inside and then out finishing a bunch of tired horses. He took advantage a little bit there, but he ran well. Listen, he's run well in all of his races. It's not like Looking at Lee's not a good horse. He is a good horse, but he doesn't have any speed. He'll be trying to pass this entire field in the stretch, and it just sort of feels like, unless they're all falling down in front, he's going to have a tough time winning it. If you're playing tries and supers, are you tossing Looking at Lee? I don't think you're tossing Looking at Lee.
Let's put up the Timeform US pace projector, because, Matt, our friends at Timeform US believe this pace could be fast. I could help Looking at Lee.
Yeah, if you think that this thing's going to get really, really cooking early on, then yeah, certainly it's a good setup for anyone coming from off the pace. We all fall in love with horses, even if we acknowledge that maybe they're not the greatest. Looking at Lee, for me, that's kind of the boat that I've fallen into. I like all of his races. He's not a superstar. I don't think anyone's going to make that case, but he's honest. He's going to show up. He's going to run his race, whether it's good enough or not. More often than not, it's not good enough. I kind of think the same thing here. I think he gets a piece.
Timeform US pace projector has Wood Memorial winner, the number 7 Irish War Cry, on the lead through this fast pace in the pace projector. Matt, you and I picked Irish War Cry to win the Kentucky Derby, and although he was 4 wide going into the first turn and carrying ground on the backstretch, boy, Rajiv certainly looked like he was full of horse, and he just went on empty at the quarter pole and was basically eased the final furlong. He has it in him to do it. He's got 2 triple-digit buyers. He's just maddeningly inconsistent at a shortish price. He's the favorite on the morning line.
You know what the interesting thing is? Had Classic Empire not scratched, I probably would have ended up picking this horse, thinking that there would be a little bit of sneaky value, maybe 5-1. Now he's going to be the favorite, and we'll talk about another horse momentarily. I don't know. Am I going to be surprised if this horse wins by 3 or 4? No, probably not. Am I going to be surprised if he's eased? No, probably not. I don't know what you're going to get from him. The good Irish War Cry can easily win. The bad Irish War Cry could run last.
But this is a horse that I think you have the same feeling about Looking at Lee. Are you going to use him in your tries and supers? I think it's hard to throw out a late-running horse like Looking at Lee. I think Irish War Cry, from a multi-race standpoint, this race is so wide open. It's a spread race if there ever is one. He falls into like the Tappert mold for me. I have to use him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know if I was a try and super player that I'd be using him. As a matter of fact, if I was trying super player, I'd be trying to beat him. And then pick four, you probably want to use him. Listen, I have no disagreement that he's the horse to beat in here. I think he is. I have real concerns about how good he actually is, because the two fast races, the 2 best races he's run, the Holy Bull and the Wood. I mean, come on, man. They're a little bit dressed up, both of them. He got totally loose on the lead in the Holy Bull in a race where Classic Empire was a total no-show. He took advantage in that race and ran a fast race. And his Wood, I mean, right up close on a speed-favoring track with a horse who was totally overmatched by him. Forget that race. I don't really care about that race for him. And then the 2 races surrounding it, the Derby included, they aren't good at all. He can win easily. He could easily win. I really don't trust this horse as the favorite.
I agree 100% that with exactas and tries and supers, I'm not going to be terrified of throwing him out and trying to use some other horses. If I'm playing any of the multis, I'm using him. I'm going to use him pretty heavily too. Not necessarily defensively, because I'm really not going to be stunned if he just is better than these horses and he works out the best trip.
Another horse that you could certainly use is the 8 Senior Investment, who might be getting good at the right time for trainer Kenny McPeek. Solid winner of the Lexington Stakes, good enough third last time out in the Preakness. Sort of an odd race, the Preakness. He was far back. It looked like he was being outpaced on the final turn and was last, and then sort of was resurgent once they swung into the straight, passed a lot of tired horses and finished third. To me, he acts like a horse that's going to really like this distance.
I'm not going to argue with anyone that just calls him a clunk up special, but at the same time, I thought he actually ran at the end, and at a mile and a half, I guess if you're looking for a horse that is going to finish, maybe it's him stunningly by Discreetly Mine. I never would have guessed that that kind of pedigree is going to want to go on with it, but I don't know. I don't love him.
I don't love him either. I like him. I don't like him in this race. I like him as a horse. I like the job McPeek's done with him. I like the way that he's just sort of heading forward. Every race that he runs is better than the one that he ran before it, and that includes the Preakness, and I thought he ran fine in the Preakness. Do I think, here's the question that I'll ask you guys. Do you think he's the best closer in the race? I don't think he's the best closer in the race, but he's one of them.
You could argue, look at it. Lee is the best closer in the race. A Senior Investment, I just think the distance is going to work. I'm not sure he has that explosive burst of speed. If this just turns into a staggerfest staying contest, maybe Senior Investment, a horse that I would use defensively in pick 4s.
And I guess the thing for me, if it turns into a war of attrition, I just don't like horses that have to pass everyone. I want to have one that, if you're just going to stay on, have a little bit of tactical speed.
Meantime, the number 9's not going to have to worry about that because he's going to be either on or near the lead for trainer Brian Lynch. And last time out in the Peter Pan, he went right to the front against a heavy favorite Timeline. Jose Ortiz tried to play a couple of little jockey games with Javier aboard Meantime and tried to drift him out, and the next thing you know, the favorite shot up the rail on him. Meantime is improving. He's very lightly raced. I wonder if this is too much too soon.
It might be too much too soon. I also wonder how far he really wants to go. I kind of get the feeling that he's going to be a lot better when they actually turn him back in distance, but we'll see what happens. I'll say this about him. I think he's good. I think he's going to get a lot better. And I think the Peter Pan was actually a really good performance from this horse.
Lone race around 2 turns, big maiden win.
Yeah, I flirted with the idea of picking him. The distance is the thing that got to me. You go back and watch the Peter Pan. This was a horse that was getting short at the end, and then you watch the gallop out. There was none. I'm not going to hold the fact that Timeline beat him against him, but I don't think he's going to want the distance.
We mentioned Senior Investment improving at the right time. Perhaps you can make the same case for the number 10 Multiplier, Matt, who looked good winning the Grade 3 Illinois Derby. I didn't really love that race as a whole, but I thought his Preakness was a little bit better than it looks on paper because he was buried inside, a little bit of minor traffic in upper stretch. It seemed like he was finishing willingly, galloped out well. Brendan Walsh is having a career year. He's adding blinkers here. This horse is now paired up by our tops in his last 2 races, and sometimes that, sort of leads to a big move forward.
I wonder, with the blinkers going on, is he going to be a little bit more forwardly placed? Because I think that's going to be critical. I don't want him coming from way out of it. This is another key example of why pedigree is not the end-all, be-all, because this horse shouldn't run
this horse defies his pedigree.
He shouldn't run a step past 7/8, but Brendan Walsh has always handled him like distance is going to be his friend. He did have a little bit of trouble at the top of the lane. He got, shuffled a little bit and came on, but I won't be surprised at all if he takes a step forward. Is it enough to win? We'll find out.
We'll see.
Showed a lot of heart in the Illinois Derby. Kind of refused to lose that race. He went and got that Pletch horse. Certainly not a superstar, but he went and got him.
Yeah, I like the way that he finished in that race. He really ran at the end to go get that horse. You're right. He's just a horse that I like all of his races. I loved his first 3 starts. I thought there was really something there, and then he won the Illinois Derby. His Preakness, I kind of want to say it's maybe a little underrated, if only because he was trying to close up the inside, and he got outfinished by Senior Investment and Looking at Lee, but they were on the outside, out in the clear. He had to steady a little bit. He got in a bit tight. I thought he ran fine in there. He clearly needs to take a step forward in this race. I wonder if he can't do it, though. He's my kind of horse in this race. I already know what everybody else is, and I don't think that they're that great. This horse, to me, he's still coming forward, and I think he will get the distance. I'm very interested in him here.
And the question mark in this race is, of course, the number 11, Epicurus, coming in from Japan. He won his first 4 starts. He ran well in the UAE Derby. We were very surprised he lost that race because it seemed like he had Thunder Snow at bay the entire stretch, only to get nipped at the wire. It just felt like everything was going right from Epicurus. Classic Empire out, lots of question marks. Why not the new face? And over the last 24 hours, everything's gone topsy-turvy because, he was treated with beauty. He came up a little bit lame the other day.
The kind of stuff that you hate to hear had nothing to the biggest race of your life, where, as of now, it's still unclear what's going to happen with him, but he came up lame the other day, so we'll see what happens. I did think that when they announced that this is where they were coming, and it was a couple of months ago, I thought, I'm going to like him in the Belmont Stakes. And now the closer we get to the race, the less I like him. I can't shake the feeling that he should have won the UAE Derby.
I picked this horse when we were on deadline Wednesday afternoon. 45 minutes later, he's got a bad footsie. I have a right to change my mind, I believe.
100%.
I'm a big fan of this horse. You know, I've been talking him up ever since after his debut on my blog, drf.com/blogs, where we occasionally talk about international racing. But now we're dealing with a horse that's never beaten a good horse, coming off, what, a 10-week layoff with perhaps a bad foot. At a shortish price.
And you know what, that's the shame of it. I would love to see, even if he runs Saturday, I'm not saying that he can't win. It just, boy, it's really hard to feel too positive about it coming out of all of this kind of stuff.
Especially when you know he's going to be 4-1.
Well,
whatever.
If
he was going to be some kind of big price, then you just go, well, I'll take my chances. But as one of the favorites, I don't think you want to do that.
But it really is a shame that we may not get to see, if we do get to see him, we may not even see his best. And that's a little bit disappointing. You guys brought up the UAE Derby. I don't know how he didn't win.
I don't either.
I thought he ran well, though.
He did, yeah, and that's the thing. And keep in mind, Thunder Snow is a quality horse. It's not like he's a bum. Don't hold the Kentucky, nonsense against him. I think this horse is nice. I just, boy, there's too many things going the wrong way.
Popular one-eyed colt, the number 12 Patch, is by Belmont Stakes winner Union Rags. You can argue that they were betting the story rather than the horse in the Kentucky Derby when he was 14-1. Didn't have the greatest trip in the world that day. Another tough outside post for John Velasquez. Patch still eligible for non-winners of one other than.
Hey, listen,
Cloud Computing was eligible for that condition.
Listen,
going into the Preakness.
he's one of those lightly raced horses who's probably going to improve down the line. And he did have a lot of trouble in that Kentucky Derby. I don't think he was going to win the Derby, but he might not have been 14th. I mean, he caught all kinds of traffic through the second turn. The question is, can he improve enough to win the Belmont? I'm not so sure.
I guess it depends what you think it's going to take to win a race like this, because if you just strip the Derby from the PPs, he's paired up 89s. If you think a mid-90 is good enough to win, then he's got a puncher's chance. I don't love him, but I won't be stunned if he runs well.
Pick time for the Belmont Stakes. Good luck in this field where everybody's got a question mark. Mike and I are kind of on the same wavelength here with Multiplier at 15-1 on the morning line. Blinkers on off Beyer tops. Think he's going to get the right setup.
Yeah, I do. I'm hoping that he takes a little step forward here. Listen, maybe we're making the race a little too complicated and it's easier than it looks, but I don't trust the favorites.
10-11, 8-2 for me. This is a spread race. You're going with Twisted Tom, 20-1, but you can't beat the connections.
No, you can't beat Javier and Chad, but I also just look at it. We've seen recently some really suspect horses get really brave out there. I mean, Commissioner comes to mind. He was not fast going into the Belmont Stakes, and he almost won the entire thing. If Twisted Tom can he's got to be forward. And I think Javier's got to send him out there from the first post.
Yeah,
you get close. I don't think he's going to be on the lead, but if you sit second or third, and if Irish Warcry throws in his dud, if Epicaris isn't feeling well, if Meantime spits the bit, it turns into a war of attrition. Why not this horse?
Why not the Governor Malibu trip from last year?
Just
that
hopefully
horse was a big
without
getting stopped in the stretch, but at least for the first mile when the trip was good. Before it wasn't. The Belmont Stakes, Grade 1 this year. Great betting race. We don't have the Derby winner. We don't have the Preakness winner, but we have a sensational betting race with a big full field and has an approximate post time of 6:37 Eastern on Saturday. Best of luck.